Basics of Life. My name is Ken Burkey, and look who we found wandering around the studios. He was actually out back in the
like
trash.
a stray,
Like a
stray dog.
John Loera is in the house. Good to see you, John.
Good to be here.
What color is that?
I don't know. I thought it was blue.
Is that
but
blue or purple? I'm
almost
colorblind, so
I think I've washed it too many times.
I'm actually pattern blind. I thought this was a solid shirt,
Yeah,
so
I can tell you it's not.
I had to wear my lumberjack shirt just for once. It's good to see you.
You too.
Hey, you want to bring a topic that is, interestingly, it's kind of an epidemic in our culture.
Yeah.
We've never been more connected in the sense of technology.
Right.
We've never, we just have a lot of people who live in our country, yet there is this epidemic of loneliness.
Right.
And loneliness isn't about not being around people.
Right.
It's something deeper than that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you kind of wanted to address that and helping people move from loneliness to well, I don't know, what is the opposite of not being lonely, being connected?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's, like you said, it's not just about physically being alone, although that is also an issue. Is that there's also an epidemic of people who are alone physically. I mean, there's a statistic that says in nationwide that of our elderly population, 20% are alone, literally, and not just without a spouse, but even family members, which is a huge number if you think about it. And so there's that aspect of it, but as you said, then there's this lack of connection that people have. There's people in one's life, and yet at the end of the day, they're still alone for all kinds of reasons. I think point being is that loneliness really comes in a lot of shapes and sizes.
Right. I think loneliness would be, I was thinking about, if I'm well connected and I know people care about me, then I don't mind being alone.
Right, right.
Because I know that's not a permanent state.
Right.
So loneliness and being alone can be two different things.
Alone time and, literally having no one in our lives is two completely different things.
So there's a lot of alone people who are alone plus are feeling lonely because they're not connected, they are elderly. There is that epidemic. Then there's that epidemic you explained. Okay, I'm around a lot of people.
But there's really but the effects are similar. And I think that, again, leading to depression, leading to destructive behaviors, leading to giving up on life in a sense, and even to the most extreme ways.
Right.
I mean, it's a very serious epidemic. Mother Teresa's famous quote saying, the greatest poverty really is loneliness.
Yeah.
Because we're human beings are wired to be in relationships.
Yeah. We were created. God created us to be in community.
Yeah, and not superficially either. Deep relationships, because that's where we actually do life together, and that's where we grow, and that's where we meet the challenges of life. It's all through community and relationships, not by ourselves.
And it's interesting how the holidays, many times, or major days like a birthday or those
Magnify.
It magnifies that.
Oh yeah, and so I think it's an awareness that I think a lot of people have, and yet there's this, hey, what can we do about that?
Before we get to the why, I think I can give an answer for why our elderly are lonely, because they're not valued. Families kind of fall apart. We don't really celebrate the family and multi-generational family and honoring our elderly. Elderly are honored in other cultures, in other countries, where they come and live with the family. So I understand that, and that's an epidemic, and we are finding that in our own county.
Right. Yeah.
But why is there such a loneliness in like large cities where there's people, or like they'll say New York or San Francisco, there's this epidemic of loneliness, yet there's people. Why is that happening?
I think partially it's the pace of life. Busyness is a killer, for all of us. I know even in my own world, and you have to work at these things as far as relationships and investment in those things. And we can be so busy, though, that we're around people, there's really no time invested in being able to develop deep relationships. So I think there's this side of it. I think there's a little bit of this, I don't know, again, fear maybe is an extreme, maybe not, but it's this unwilling to put ourselves out there and be open to, hey, this is who I am. Because you can't build deep relationships unless you put yourself out there as well.
Maybe you've been burnt in the past or...
Trust issues, that sort of thing. Right. And so I think there's a combination, but I do know that it's hard because even in families, I look at going back to the elderly and I see families generationally and loneliness even within families that are intact, if you will, but yet busyness is just no time invested. It's just, the pace of life is just crazy for all of us,
Can you remember a time, I'm going to put you on the spot, where you were lonely, but people wouldn't have known it?
That's a great question. I certainly I could. And I think it was more of when I was going back to this busyness thing is when I was working at in a particular career that I was traveling a lot, my job was pretty much my life. And though I had my family, my investment and my time and my focus was really within my job. And there was really no quality time, if you will, in my relationships in my life. There was people around me all the time.
So you looked successful on
the outside, and I would socialize to certain degrees, and I'd spend some time with family, but really there was no depth there. My mindset was really on all this other stuff that was going on in my life that was focused on work. And during this time, I can look back now, and some of it's interesting because some of it during that time for me, I probably would not have said that during the time. You're kind of going through the motions, but you're going, well, yeah, I got people in my life. Yeah. Well, do I?
Yeah.
And
word depth is an interesting word.
Yeah.
Because we live in a very shallow culture. So again, it goes back to, well, that's going to create loneliness.
It does.
Without depth.
Without depth. And the result of that, which is tragic, is in those times, then you're kind of skewed in your decision making too, and the things that you do, and I think if I look back, I was more depressed at that time.
Yeah.
I was probably making choices in my life that were, not the best choices.
Yeah.
Wasn't motivated. Just lack of relationship in my life.
That depth is a huge one. And the other one I was thinking about is, you can feel lonely if you're going through a struggle and you feel like nobody understands.
Yeah.
That's another one.
Huge.
Where you feel like, well, I got people around, but maybe you're carrying a burden, and maybe it's because you're not willing to share it, or maybe you're around people who don't want
really
to
want to share it, or they're too big.
That can be very lonely.
Well, there's actually a quote that somebody said, and I can't remember who it was. It says that people don't fail or quit or give up because their circumstances are too big. It's because they feel like they're alone in the situation. And it's that thing of, for whatever reason that they feel like people don't understand, if it's there, if they feel like it's just me, it's the greatest demotivator.
Yeah, it's that quote, it's lonely at the top. Well, what that means is, at the top, well, no one else understands kind of thing. And
so it's that step of trying to find those places that go, okay, how do people then understand? How do I get people to, I think we all have to do some soul searching in our lives too about, this is twofold. It's, if I'm lonely, what do I have to do to actually kind of be more open about that? And if I'm somebody, though, that have relationships in my life, how do I help others that are struggling with loneliness? Because we have a responsibility both ways there.
Yeah. So what are those? I mean, we talked about, obviously, you have to take ownership on building depth.
Yeah.
Slowing down, then also you have to create an atmosphere where you have people who will carry your burdens.
Yeah. I think you have to, starting out with the side where somebody maybe who is lonely, who doesn't have those relationships, or maybe they've burned bridges and they're lonely as a result of some destructive behaviors in their life. Yeah. I think you have to look at putting yourself out there. And that's a risky thing. Yeah. It's finding those places. I think the ownership on somebody who struggles with loneliness, which is easier said than done, is taking a step and saying, what can I do to actually create some relationships in my life, you know? And I think I go back to Green Valley. The church is a great place for that in so many avenues, because relationships don't just get built. You don't meet somebody and go, okay, now I'm gonna tell you everything.
We'll be best friends, and
that's a little scary, actually.
I was going to say, if you meet somebody for the first time and they're telling you you're their deepest, darkest,
usually they're going to go, okay, you know. But I think in the sense that there's ministry, and the church is a place that we see this. I mean, our food and clothing outreach on Saturdays is a great example of that. And that's across the board. But I'll just highlight our senior population there, which there is not only a high senior population, but there's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of people who are alone, and they literally come to this place. Obviously, there's resources there, but one of the greatest aspects of that is the relationship side. And there's been people coming there now for a long time to get that sort of need met, where they've built relationship. There's people that care there. There's other seniors that have met there. But it took somebody taking a step and putting themselves out there to say, this is something that I'm facing, is I'm by myself. I mean, I have literally seen people's demeanors and life and emotions change from when they first came there being depressed and, I'm struggling to, this is where this is my social time that's important for me, that helps me navigate life.
And that's why Mother Teresa said that we can't solve everyone's problems, but nobody has to be lonely.
Yeah.
Well, I think when you were talking about it, I think about our single moms class.
It's another one.
There's a lot of struggles and challenges of life, but when those moms came together, when they started that class, they realized, I'm not alone. Yeah. It's the same thing with Marriage 52. A couple comes in, they're struggling, they feel all alone.
We're not the only ones dealing with this.
I mean, on and on. Fight Club, which is our men's group, I was talking to a gentleman just last week, and he goes, going to that class and hearing other men's struggles makes me feel like, okay, I'm not alone in this. And it's actually given them more courage to take some steps. So
I had a gentleman, I don't know, it's been some months ago, at our food and clothing outreach that was there who struggled with the burning bridges in his life, struggled with some addiction issues, and has gotten back on track, but really has no relationships, also needed some resources, and was coming there. And his greatest connection there was meeting some other people that have gone through that and starting to put people back in his life that are for him. And he was sitting at a table having breakfast there, because we serve breakfast there, and he made a comment to me at that time. He says, this is my FaceTime, every week. This is where I come and I get to tell people what's going on in my life. People actually care and ask me about that. And he goes, my outlook isn't perfect. I'm still going through stuff, but I have a whole different mindset about how I'm going to go through that. I'm more motivated to actually live a better life,
So it's a great point, and it kind of combines both. If we're going to get deeper, part of getting deeper is being willing to take those steps, but then we end up finding people will carry our burdens, but then we carry other people's burdens too. So, bear one another's burdens, the Bible talks about, and that's part of not being lonely.
Right, and one of the things, because if we are called to do that, to actually be there for others, and to be willing to create places where people can build deeper relationships. And I think that it's, so you're asking people who struggle with loneliness to take that step, and then you're asking people who maybe are, in somebody's life or can be, to also take a step, and that's to create time for those sorts of things, and create an environment and a space where people are trusting enough to put themselves out there. Because that is one of the hardest things for somebody dealing with loneliness is, do I really want to, does somebody really care? Is somebody really going to take the time? Is somebody going to, and for us, and I say us, meaning people who have maybe, that aren't struggling with that, we have to look at it from the standpoint too of, hey, we might have people even in our own families, in our own circle of influence, that we just don't invest time in, that are lonely.
Right.
It's amazing how big this problem is. Yeah. And it's like we all have to kind of go, hey, am I investing my time into those relationships? That busyness thing also keeps us from, okay, I'm busy, and yet here I've got a family member who is lonely, or I have a grandmother who doesn't get visited, whatever those are. We all have those in our lives, those situations as well.
So we have to slow down, obviously.
It is.
And again, this is such an American culture. That cultural thing, that's why when I asked you that question, that was a great answer. When we're busy, we just don't do relationships well. An example, I was in Africa, and there was a pastor there in Africa. He's an African pastor, and we worked together and had meetings and strategic things, and he's a leader, but it was all on that surface.
Yeah.
And the day before we were going to fly home, he says, hey, I want to spend some time with you.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, great. that'd be great. But there was no agenda. There was nothing. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? He comes in and he did this so much better than I did. We sat in this back porch overlooking the Niger River, and he was like in this rocking chair. And as Americans, we have to fill in if there's ever a gap in the conversation. He just literally wanted to hang out with me.
Yeah, this time.
And we spent an hour and a half, and probably we talked for about 20 minutes of that hour and a half. And at first I was really uncomfortable because I'm like, oh, how do I carry this conversation on? And that's Americans. We have to carry the conversation.
Right.
He didn't. He was just happy to be there.
Yeah.
And we hung
Yeah.
out. And that's
powerful.
And that, going back to here, our own local, our family, is we have much more power to heal people than we think. We can't solve everyone's problems, but we can be there.
Yeah.
And that's where I think at Green Valley, with our taking it to the streets or life skill classes or any community service, we find out that's our most powerful gift is presence. You mentioned that earlier. It's presence.
It is. It is.
Not that we don't solve problems if we can, but
no.
I think we because we can't measure presence. We only measure we gave away this much food, or we gave away a car, or we fixed somebody's. But presence
is powerful.
It's invaluable.
Yeah. A lot of times with all those resources that we do, somebody might ask somebody that wants to volunteer and say, well, okay, I'm here. What would you like me to do? And sometimes it's just that, hey, go sit and have breakfast at a table.
Yeah.
Just go hang out.
Yeah.
And sometimes somebody might go, really? Well,
give me
something to do, and then they'll go and sit, and you can just see it. It's such a beautiful thing to see, and somebody who, it's almost like people are like, wow, somebody's actually talking to me.
Yeah.
I am so starved and deprived of relationship that it's mind blowing how much poverty there is, and that people, we take it for granted sometimes.
Yeah.
Hey, I loneliness,
Right.
I have all kinds of people. I have investment, good deep relationships and so on. But when you don't have those, and you start to hear those stories, it's like, how could we not want to put ourselves into those places to give people that time? I mean, just
power of presence. It is much more powerful and effective than we think.
And it literally changes the trajectory of people's lives.
It does.
There's no doubt.
I was thinking another thing, has to do with Common Ground, our food and clothing event, but there was a lady that she started coming, and she was very lonely and very disconnected. And so she talked to me, and it was a little overwhelming. She was so lonely. And so, but what has happened over the years is, because the consistency, she knows people care, she's much more relaxed. And so now I can have a conversation with her, and I can go, okay, this isn't going to be a 2-hour conversation, because the first time, and that can be scary at first.
Yeah.
All she just, because she didn't know, she thought this is it. This is my own, but she came back, oh, it's familiar faces. And she came back, and now it's like, no, I'm not lonely anymore. I don't need to.
Right.
I'm not so desperate.
Right.
It's you can see that peace.
Right, and there's just a fuller life there then, because it's not so. Again, I know that for myself in my seasons, we are our own worst enemy, and we're by ourselves. There's so many paths we can go down that even aren't reality. And we need people in our lives. We need healthy people in our lives. We need people in our lives that care for us, that that don't just say it, but show it through the time and presence and that.
So as a community, as a church, as a wonderful community we live in, we really believe in the power of presence. There's a lot of loneliness out there, and really, especially in our elderly population, and we really have that ownership to invest in that. But just close the show with just talking to maybe somebody who's out there who is lonely. What are some steps they could take?
Well, I think the steps are, which I think is hard sometimes, is to first of all be open to the possibilities. Maybe it's somebody who's been hurt and there's some trust issues, but the church is a great place to take a step. It's safe, it's non-threatening. And it's that first step that, like you explained to this person, that at first was really dependent, but then started to see that there's some great relationship potential out there. So taking that first step can really change everything. And it could be just coming to. We have pastoral partners there during the week that would love to just sit and talk to somebody. There's no agenda. Pray with somebody, maybe help them to get connected and take a step. Our food and clothing ministry on Saturdays.
A lot of different life skill classes common interests where we're finding, again, that step is not only just to learn, but it's to connect.
Yeah, or maybe somebody who's alone, as I said earlier, that's, burned some bridges
Yeah.
and has nobody. This is also a safe place that somebody could come and say, there's no judgment here.
Yeah.
And it's still, we all need people in our lives to stay on track and to
Yeah.
live a healthier life.
And I think there's a lot of steps once you get out there, but that first step's the hardest step.
It's that first one.
It's that first
Yeah.
step.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
You bet.
It's a great topic, and I think we all, can slow down. That busyness can get us all to that place of
Yeah.
superficial relationships.
Yeah, just take a breath a little bit and
Yeah.
kind of be aware of what's around us.
Yeah. Thank you.
You bet.
It's a great topic. Thank you for being with us here on the basics of life, and we will see you next time.